Okay, kids. Today's lesson that we're going to be looking at is on reflexive verbs. And one of the most important things to know about reflexive verbs to begin with is that there are actually three different kinds of them. The first type of reflexive verbs are what are called true reflexives. Now, a true reflexive is a verb in which the action of the verb goes back to the doer of the verb. If you think about it, when you look in a mirror, what do you see? You see a reflection of yourself. So a true reflexive verb is a verb in which whoever does the action of the verb, they do it to themselves. Some typical verbs that would be in this particular category are verbs like bañarse, to give oneself a bath, or to bathe oneself, secarse, to dry oneself, and a verb like ducharse, to take a shower, or to shower oneself. You might say that the true reflexive verbs are the ones in which you can see yourself, okay? When you end up conjugating these verbs, that yourself will change depending on whoever is doing the action of the verb. It might be myself or himself or herself, etc. The true reflexives are the easiest reflexives to understand because you can actually see the action of the verb going back to the doer. In addition to bañarse, secarse, ducharse, there are many more verbs that would fall into this category. The second type of reflexive is a reflexive known as an idiomatic reflexive. Now, idiomatic reflexives are among the more difficult ones to understand conceptually because these reflexives, simply put, are reflexives because they are. These are reflexives that are idiomatic to Spanish, meaning that they are particular to the Spanish language. They may not be a reflexive verb in English or other languages, but they are in Spanish. They are idiomatic. For instance, a verb that is reflexive in Spanish is the verb reírse. Now, reírse means to laugh. You cannot laugh yourself. So this particular verb and verbs like it that fall into this idiomatic category are often a little bit more difficult to understand, at least from a conceptual standpoint, because they are reflexives just because they are. A lot of times our idiomatic reflexives will kind of carry the context of getting. An example would be a verb like aburrirse, to get bored. You're not necessarily making yourself bored, but you're getting bored. And these verbs are, or will fall under the category of being idiomatic. The last type of reflexive verb is verbs that are called reciprocal reflexives. Now, reciprocal reflexives require two or more people to form the action of the verb. In other words, the action of the verb is done by one person to the other, and they do it back. They do the action to each other. Some verbs that may fall under this category would be verbs like telefonearse, to call one another, and odiarse, to hate one another. So again, whoever does the action of the verb, they do it to somebody else, and then that person does it right back. They do it to each other. And with the idiomatic and the reciprocal reflexives, just as in with the true reflexives, there are many verbs that fall into each category. Now, in terms of conjugating reflexive verbs, the first thing that we have to identify is that the verb is reflexive. Reflexive verbs are easy to identify in Spanish because they have a reflexive pronoun at the end, se. And this is called a reflexive pronoun. And it tells us that the verb is a reflexive verb and it must be conjugated as such. When we conjugate a reflexive verb, the first thing that we want to do is we want to remove the se from the end of the verb, and we have to change the reflexive pronoun to match the subject that we're conjugating with. In the yo form, that se is going to become may. In the tu form, it will become say. In the la y usted form, it will stay as say. In nosotros, it will become nos. In vosotros, it will become os. And in ellos, it will stay as say. Once the se has been removed and changed appropriately according to the subject, all that you need to do is to conjugate the verb that is left over. In this particular case, it's the verb bañar. We've already dealt with the se at the end, and now we just need to conjugate bañar. And we're going to do that just as we would any other verb. This particular verb in the present tense happens to be a normal verb, so we're just going to conjugate it as such. When we're done, we have a verb that is fully conjugated, and the only difference between this and a regular verb is the addition of the reflexive pronoun. The reflexive pronoun and the verb are written as two separate words, although they're all part of one conjugation. Me baño, te bañas, se baña, etc. When these are translated over to English, we have to remember to include the reflexive pronoun as part of the definition. If bañarse means to bathe oneself, when it becomes conjugated, we need to change the oneself into the appropriate subject. For instance, me baño, I bathe myself. Te bañas, you bathe yourself. Se bañan, they bathe themselves, and so on and so forth. On this slide, I've given you a reflexive verb to practice your conjugations. So take a moment, pause the video, and try to conjugate the verb ponerse. Now that you've had time to conjugate the verb, let's work on it together. Remember, the se, or the reflexive pronoun at the end, is going to come off, and it's going to be changed in various subjects. In yo, it's me. In tu, it's te. In el, it's se. In nosotros, it's nos. In vosotros, it's os. In ellos, it's se. Once that's been handled, we're going to conjugate the verb that's left over, which is poner, and we're going to do that as we would poner. Remember, the yo form is pongo. We have pones, pone, ponemos, pones, and ponen. So the verb poner, in addition to the reflexive pronoun, is the correct conjugation of the verb. This verb means to put on, such as to put clothes on oneself. So again, when you conjugate it and you flip it into English, me pongo, okay, I put clothes on myself. Nos ponemos, we put clothes on ourselves, or where else is being put on.